Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back. I told you I'd be back on here eventually. Tonight was later than I thought it would be, but we continue. The show must go on, as they say. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. We're rolling.
I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
All right. Hey, everybody. So we were streaming earlier today, and it was election day, but we were talking all about North Korea. And a lot of super chats came in earlier today, and I still have those super chats written down. So I'm going to talk a little bit more, just kind of continue with the opening remarks for a little bit. Just going to continue with it for a little bit. And then we'll do the roll call, and then I'll start with the super chats that came in from earlier today. If more super chat questions come in, by all means, I will add them to the list and write them down. But yes, I do. We got plenty of super chats to answer from earlier in the day, and there's plenty to talk about. I've been doing election coverage. You saw me on RT earlier. I was talking about the election results, as they're coming in. We're not going to know the election results, by the way, just FYI, folks. We're not going to know them for quite some time. Because of the mail-in voting, Michigan and a number of other states, they extended the deadline for certification of results. So, it looks like it's going to be a sweep for the Republicans. That's what it looks like, but it'll be a while before we know for sure. It'll be a while. One thing that is worth noting is that shit in Arizona, man. Holy cow. Holy moly. That is a recipe for disaster. What's going on there in Arizona, right? Already you got a lot of people in Arizona that say something happened in 2020. The candidate for governor, Carrie Lake, she says something was happening in 2020. And now the Democrat governor, the Democrat candidate for governor, the Secretary of State, Katie Hobbs, she's the one in charge of voting machines and elections. Now something happened in Maricopa County, and oh, goodness gracious, this could really get ugly. Things could get ugly in Arizona pretty quick, it could get real interesting there. Now, earlier tonight, the Republicans, they filed a lawsuit to keep the polling places open, and their lawsuit was dismissed by the courts. The courts said no. And yeah, this could get interesting real quick. I mean, I've been watching Arizona here for a while, been following that because Carrie Lake is she's like the shining star of the MAGA movement. She is like the MAGA candidate in this election, and it could get really ugly in Arizona really quick. So we'll just have to see how things go. But, it looks like it's going to be a sweep for the Republicans. We're not going to know officially for a little bit. But I was talking earlier tonight about North Korea. That's what I spent, my afternoon stream. We were talking all about the Korean Peninsula, North Korea, South Korea. I went over the history of Park Chung-hee and Syngman Rhee, and I went over the history of North Korea and what they've been through. And, I talked about all of that. I don't know if you all have heard about the latest controversy in South Korean politics. It's worth pointing out. I mean, it sounds almost kind of stupid, but it's not stupid. It's a big deal, which is that, the former president was Moon Jae-in. Moon Jae-in was the president of South Korea in 2018, 2019, when all the good stuff was happening with Trump. When Trump went to North Korea, when Trump was meeting with Kim Jong-un, the president was Moon Jae-in was the president. Well, Moon Jae-in was given a gift by North Korea. They gave him 2 dogs, 2 beautiful dogs. They gave him 2 peace dogs. But when you're the president of a country, and this is a really interesting fact, when you're the president of a country and you get a gift from the president of another country, you don't get to keep it. Did you know that? I mean, it's technically a gift to the country, right? And this applies to like every country. You know, you go to North Korea, they've got all kinds of museums full of stuff that Kim Jong-il, Kim Il-sung was given, right? You know, in the United States, they have like museums and lockers where all the gifts that presidents have been given, they don't get to keep them, right? You know, it's technically a gift to the country. It belongs to the government, right? So, you know, like, you know, if Trump is president and he goes and meets with, you know, the president of India, and the president of India gives him a fancy diamond, when Trump leaves office, he can't keep that diamond. That diamond just goes into this locker for presidential gifts. And it's like that in most countries, right? Because technically, you know, it makes sense. It's about bribery, right? You don't want bribery and stuff like that. So these 2 dogs, these are actually living animals. These are not, you know, it's not a diamond. It's not a painting. It's not a, you know, a fruit or whatever. It's actually dogs. These 2 dogs were given, these 2 peace dogs, they're huskies, I believe, were given to Moon Jae-in by North Korea. They're called peace dogs. That's neat, right? I think they got a lot of huskies in North Korea. Is that like a thing, right? Is it like Alaska where they got a lot of huskies? I don't know. What is this? We are living in an upside down land when the rank and file of GOP are more anti-war than the DNC. Writing it down. All right. That's on the list. You're on the list. And these dogs, these peace dogs, they were given to Moon Jae-in. Well, Moon Jae-in left office. And technically, he is not allowed to keep those dogs. Well, what are they going to do with the dogs? And he said, no, I want to take the dogs with me. I like them. He's been taking care of them. They're nice dogs. And he said, you know what? I want to keep these dogs. But under the South Korean law, he's not allowed to do that. Meanwhile, the current president of South Korea already has 4 dogs of his own that he takes care of. So he doesn't want to take care of these 4 dogs either. And there's a big controversy now in South Korea about what to do with the peace dogs, right? There was a proposal that Moon Jae-in, they let him keep them, but then the government give him a stipend so he doesn't feed them himself. They're fed by the government. They're trying to figure out what to do about these peace dogs. It's fascinating. But why is it fascinating, right? At the end of the day, we all know why there's a controversy about the peace dogs. We all know why there's a controversy, and that's because these dogs are a symbol. If the South Korean leaders were to just abandon these dogs out on the street or have them put to sleep or, I don't know, throw them in a kennel somewhere, that would be sending a message to North Korea that they don't want to continue the peace process. So the fact that in South Korea, they're scrambling, what do we do with these dogs from North Korea? Do we give them, do we let Moon Jae-in take care of them? Do we let the current president take care of them? No, he's already got 4 dogs. Okay, do we give, the fact that they're having all this controversy about what to do with the peace dogs, right? That shows that there is political will for peace with North Korea in the South Korean government. I mean, there clearly is a big section of the South Korean government that's like, all right, North Korea gave us these 2 dogs and we're not going to let them die. We're not going to abandon them. We're not just going to quietly disappear them. This is important. And that is a really good sign. It's a really good sign. And it shows that there is will for peace and in South Korea, more than there has been in a really long time. And that is a really good sign. And, I am optimistic. I am optimistic. And if the Republicans have a sweep, the Republicans want to continue this North Korea stuff. And I went into great detail about that on the last stream. If you missed the stream from earlier this afternoon, the first midterm election day stream, this is the election night stream. I wore the same shirt, so you'll recognize the bright yellow shirt. But if you missed it, go and watch the earlier stream where I go into great detail about why Trump did what he did and Russia and China's role in it and North Korea and South Korea. This is all really, really important because I believe that the Center for Political Innovation, we can play a very, very important role in bringing North and South Korea together and bringing America and North Korea together. I believe that we can play a very important role in that, right? Because look, and I'll let me explain why that is. Why is our community, the community that started around these live streams, the Center for Political Innovation, why is it that we would be the group, the organization that would play this important role, right? I mean, what about the Communist Party USA? Couldn't they do it? Well, actually, no. Communist Party USA cut ties with North Korea. Did you know that? When North Korea proliferated nuclear weapons, the Communist Party USA, I believe it was, and the guy's name was Dan Margolis, who was the writer for People's Weekly World. He put out the editorial condemning North Korea. And as of now, the Communist Party USA and North Korea don't have a relationship. Now, the Communist Party USA has a relationship with the Communist Party of China and the Communist Party of Vietnam. But the Communist Party USA has no relationship with North Korea. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm serious. The French Communist Party has a relationship with North Korea. All the lame communist parties around the world have a relationship with North Korea, but not CPUSA. CPUSA cut ties with North Korea. And I know this more than just because of the op-ed. You Google it now, Dan Margolis, North Korea. You can read the op-ed that the CPUSA wrote condemning North Korea's, nuclear proliferation. But it's more than that. Because I know this intimately, because I was in the Workers' World Party for many years. And the Workers' World Party also has relations with North Korea. And I watched as this happened because, Deirdre Griswold, she was the leader of the Workers' World Party who frequently went to the North Korean mission. And when the North Korean mission to the UN, which is it's just like an office suite near the UN, the North Korean mission, right? That's the only office North Korea has in the United States, right? There's no diplomatic relations. So because North Korea is a UN member state, they do have a UN mission, right? It's near the United Nations in Midtown Manhattan, but they do not have an embassy here. They don't have a foreign interest off. They have nothing, right? The only thing they've got is this UN mission. So when the UN mission of North Korea would have these receptions, and I went to one of them. I actually got to go to one of them. It was a great honor to go into the North Korean office suite in Manhattan. But they would bring representatives of different organizations that were friendly to North Korea to the office suite. And I remember when I went to the reception at the North Korean office, it was actually a neat experience. It wasn't just neat to talk to the North Koreans. It wasn't just neat to eat the Korean food and to see the office with pictures of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-un and such. But it was also really neat to be at that office, and see who was there. Because I remember when I walked in to this reception at the North Korean office, there was this guy with a huge beard, this man with a huge beard. Was there. And so I shook hands with him. And I said, I'm Caleb. I'm with the Workers' World Party. And he said, I'm a leader of the Mennonite Church. I said, really? Apparently, folks, there are a number of Mennonites in North Korea. Now, who would have ever guessed this? Who would have ever guessed in a million years that there were Mennonites in North Korea? But apparently, the Mennonite Church, they do charity work in North Korea. They have missionaries in North Korea. And the Mennonite Church has a relationship with the North Korean government. And so this guy was there representing the Mennonite Church. And I talked to him, and this Mennonite, this huge beard, was telling me that, yeah, they're totally misunderstood. And, and the United States is escalating the peace process. The Mennonites, who would have thought the Mennonites support North Korea? Well, they don't support North Korea, but they're pacifists. And they want to make peace with countries that the United States is at odds with. They want to make peace with Iran. They want to make peace with Venezuela. And North Korea is a country that the United States is at odds with. And so, yes, the Mennonite, there was a guy from the Mennonite church. I was in line. We're in line, to get kimchi from the like, there's a little like tiny buffet of like Korean food. And we're in line, and I'm in line, and I'm chatting up the guy from the Mennonite church who was there. I mean, that was an amazing experience, right? And he's giving me, like, he knows the Korean conflict, and he's been to North Korea a number of times representing the Mennonite church. Who would have guessed, right? And, I mean, it's fascinating, but there's a lot of Christians in North Korea. Did you know that? I bet you didn't know that. But go and read Anna Louise Strong, her book about North Korea, because she, before the Korean War, when there was a new government being formed in the Korean Peninsula, in the northern Korean Peninsula, before the Korean War broke out, Anna Louise Strong, my favorite, in many ways, she is like my favorite writer. And she talked about how, in North Korea, now they have the Korean Workers' Party. But the Korean Workers' Party was a merger. I bet you didn't know this. The Korean Workers' Party is not the Communist Party. Okay? The Korean Workers' Party is a merger of all of the anti-Japanese, anti-fascist parties that were operating in the northern half of the Korean Peninsula. Did you know that? I bet you didn't know that. I bet you didn't know that, but now you know it, right? And it's a merger of the Communist Party, the Social Democratic Party, and the Christian Party. Did you know that? The Korean Workers' Party is a merger of 3 different political parties: the Social Democratic Party, the Communist Party, and the Christian Party. Bet you didn't know that. And there are there's some regions in North Korea that are Christian. Most of North Korea are atheists. They accept dialectical materialist Marxism, the Juche ideology. But there are certain regions in North Korea that are heavily Christian. Again, I bet you didn't know that, right? Of course, you don't see that in the propaganda. That's not in the Vice documentaries demonizing North Korea. But it's actually true. There are whole Christian regions in North Korea. Fact that you didn't know. But anyway, so I went to these receptions with Deirdre Griswold sometimes. I went to one. I went to one, actually. But Deirdre Griswold went to them all the time. But Dan Margolis, who was a guy from the Communist Party USA, he was always the guy from the Communist Party USA who would go and represent the CPUSA at these receptions that the North Koreans had. And Dan Margolis was the guy who wrote the article condemning North Korea for the People's Weekly World, for the Communist Party USA. And he then stopped going to the receptions that the North Koreans would have. The CPUSA cut ties with North Korea. So the Communist Party, don't expect them to have any role in the peace process. And besides, they think Trump is a Nazi, right? They've got a bread tube liberal perspective, right? They're part of the woke. They're woke. I mean, they had a national meeting a couple months ago about the fact that, oh my God, the Republicans might win at the midterms, right? I mean, they're just Democratic Party activists. And since the Republicans want peace with North Korea, isn't that interesting? When Republicans want a better relationship with North Korea, and Democrats don't, why is the Communist Party USA no longer supporting North Korea? It makes you wonder if perhaps the Communist Party USA is actually working for the Democrats. It also makes you wonder, the Communist Party USA has a good relationship with China, but they're very, very hostile to Russia. And they run crazy articles about Dugin that sound like something from Rachel Maddow. And the Russian Communist Party has, completely basically cut ties with the Communist Party USA because the Communist Party USA is so anti-Russian. It sounds to me like maybe the Communist Party USA isn't loyal to communism. They're loyal to the Democrats. Profound thought. But anyway, so at this point, the Communist Party USA has no relationship with North Korea. None. Right? The Workers' World Party does. The Socialist Workers' Party, the Trotskyite Socialist Workers' Party, they do, which is even weirder because they were neutral during the Korean War. Did you know this? Like the Socialist Workers' Party, they were Trotskyites. They were neutral during the Korean War. They considered North Korea to be a Stalinist regime. But in the 1980s, Jack Barnes, the leader of Jack Barnes, this guy, this young, like, hippie guy became the leader of the SWP in the 80s, right? When the SWP was getting weaker. In the 1976, the SWP sued the FBI. They took the FBI to court. They sued the FBI for infiltrating them, the Socialist Workers' Party. And the FBI infiltrated them. They sued the FBI, but then the FBI gave them all kinds of false information about infiltration. They said that like 1 in 4 members was an FBI informant. It was actually much lower. It was like more like 1 in 20 members. But it created a huge amount of paranoia. And, from the time they sued the FBI in 1976 to the mid 80s, they shed thousands of members, and by the mid 80s, they were down to a couple hundred people. I mean, it was shocking. The SWP just completely fell apart. But Jack Barnes, who was the leader of the SWP, he published this document called Their Trotsky and Ours. And he basically changed the SWP's orientation. Now the Socialist Workers' Party, they support Cuba and they support North Korea. And they don't promote Trotskyism as much or something. It's the Pathfinder tendency, the people who write the Militant newspaper. So they have a relationship with North Korea. And so does the Workers' World Party. So does the Answer Coalition, Brian Becker. I don't think the PSL officially has a relationship, but Answer, the anti-war group, Act Now to Stop War and End Racism, they do have a relationship with North Korea. And so, there are some leftist groups that do, but it won't be the Communist Party USA. But it's interesting. I mean, it's very interesting. But anyway, the point that I was making is, why is it that I think that the Center for Political Innovation, CPI, could play a very important role in bringing peace to the Korean Peninsula? Why? Well, there's a couple things. First things first is that for whatever reasons, for the reasons that I explained earlier today, Republicans want a better relationship with North Korea. Democrats don't. Neocons and Democrats don't. But it seems like the MAGA Republicans, for all their flaws, they want a better relationship with North Korea. And CPI is the only group that has come out, the Center for Political Innovation. We are the only voice in the name of Marxism in the United States. Really, I mean, there are different individuals, there are different groups that have done different things, but we are the main organizational expression, the only real organizational expression of opposition to following the Democratic Party. Almost all of the Marxist and communist groups have joined this Democratic Party liberal, mobilization against Trump and against conservatives, and in the name of anti-fascism. We have resisted that. We have said, out of the movement to the masses. That's been my slogan for a long time. Out of the movement to the masses. Out of the movement to the masses. And that has meant that we aren't, unlike CPUSA, we are not wrapped up in wokeism. We are not wrapped up in trying to pander to the Democratic Party, pander to liberalism, pander to, to all this identity politics and all that. We're not doing that. But there's something deeper than that. Something very, very much deeper than that. Because, in 2013, I went to the World Festival of Youth and Students in Quito, Ecuador. And I've told this story many, many times, but I will tell it again because it's so important. 2013, global communist youth gathering that happens every 4 years happened in Quito, Ecuador. I went to it. And North Korea was a big participant in that festival. And, you know, I've told the story of how at the airport, everyone started cheering for the North Koreans when they got off the plane. I've told the story of their singers. They had these professional singers that didn't just sing traditional Korean music. They sang Italian opera. They sang Guantanamera and songs of the Latin American revolutionary tradition. I've told the story of, you know, in Korean culture, right? Hugging, public display of affection is no, you don't do that. There is no public display of affection. It's considered to be not a good thing to do. In Latin America, it's the opposite. You know, Latin America, you talk to people from Latin America, you know, they're kissing on the cheek and they're hugging, and there's a lot of that, right? So these North Koreans, they come from a culture where you don't hug and kiss and touch people. They're in Latin America, in Quito, Ecuador, where we're all hugging and kissing. So what I thought was just the sweetest thing was the North Koreans, as soon as they saw you, they would just throw their arms around you because they'd been trained, right? They'd been trained. Oh, in our culture, we don't hug, but in Quito, Ecuador, in Latin America, they do. And so they would like, when the North Koreans would see you and you would meet with the North Koreans, they would like forcibly hug you, like as soon as they saw you. It was adorable. It was the sweetest thing. They were trying to be culturally accommodating. It was adorable, right? They're just like, oh, good to meet you. Good to meet you. And, you know, and they would like hug you. It was sweet. They were trying to do the right thing. Their culture, you don't hug. And it was the sweetest thing. And, you know, I've still got here, this is my copy of the revolutionary activities of President Kim Il-sung. They gave this to me. They gave me this book. They gave me a stack of English language books at that festival. I've still got a few of them. I think I've given some of them away, but they gave me this book, The Revolutionary Activities of Kim Il-sung. You know, there he is, the founder of North Korea, whose name, by the way, one thing about Kim Il-sung that I just think is badass. I just think it's badass, okay? Kim Il-sung, that wasn't the name he was born with, which is really common for revolutionaries, right? Stalin was not actually called Stalin, right? Stalin's actual birth name was Joseph Zhugashvili, right? But he changed his name to Man of Steel, Joseph Man of Steel, because he wanted to sound badass, right? You know, Lenin was not Lenin. He wasn't born Lenin. He was born Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov. But there was a river in his area called, I think it was like, there was a river near where he lived, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, called Lenin. And he said, oh, I'm just going to be called Lenin. You know, and that often these revolutionaries would adopt badass names, right? So Kim Il-sung, right? That was not his name. Kim Il-sung means Kim becomes the sun, like the S-U-N, like the rising sun. That's what his name means. Kim becoming the sun. Holy shit. That is a badass name, right? But it's an outlaw name because Kim Il-sung, right? Kim Il-sung, Kim becomes the sun, was a legendary figure in Korea. Kim Il-sung was the name of like a Robin Hood type character. Long before Kim Il-sung, the founder of North Korea, there was some kind of Robin Hood. There was this kind of like mountain Robin Hood outlaw, this social bandit. They talk about this, like Robin Hood and you know, Zorro. Well, Zorro's fictional, but you know, they call them social bandits. When there's somebody who goes around robbing the rich to feed the poor, a criminal who becomes famous, like Pretty Boy Floyd, right? Woody Guthrie, he sings, "Oh, you gather around my children, a story I will tell about Pretty Boy Floyd, an outlaw." You know, I mean, it's, you know, that during the Great Depression, there was a lot of people who loved Pretty Boy Floyd, right? Who was a bank robber in Oklahoma, and who knows if it even happened, but there were all these legends about, you know, he would, after he robbed a bank, he would go to a starving family and give them $100 bills or something. Who knows if that actually happened? But, you know, but there was this social bandits. It's a global phenomenon. It's been around a long time. They call them social bandits, right? You know, it's criminals that become heroes to the population, you know, because the people are mad at the government. Probably the biggest example of that I've seen, the most recent example of a social bandit that I've ever seen is Christopher Dorner. Do you folks remember Christopher Dorner? You remember Christopher Dorner? I'm dating myself, right? That was 10, maybe, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. There was a former police officer from Los Angeles, a black man named Christopher Dorner. And Christopher Dorner had been fired from being a police officer. And the story was that he had seen 2 cops beat up a guy who was being held in the jail cell, kicking him in the face. And so he reported it, and they fired him from being a police officer. And so Chris Dorner, he started, after being fired from being a police officer, he started murdering police officers. And this was before Black Lives Matter really exploded. I mean, there had been a few cases, but in the context of Black Lives Matter getting going and anger in the black community about police brutality, all over social media, they started making Chris Dorner fan pages. This former cop, can't corner the Dorner, this former cop who started killing cops and killing their family members. I mean, I certainly don't condone anything he was doing. And, there were irresponsible statements made at the time. I mean, it was not, it was a silly ultra-left thing. I would not glorify him. But among the black community in particular, there was a feeling that that guy was a hero. He was a social bandit. Now, he wasn't robbing people and robbing the rich to feed the poor or anything like that, but he was a former cop who saw police brutality and corruption in the police department. And so he went rogue and started killing cops. And there became, the social media. Facebook was like cracking down. There were like hundreds of pro Christopher Dorner fan pages that were made, hundreds of tweets in support of him. It was a similar phenomenon because the black community was mad about police brutality. And because this guy was a criminal who was fighting the police, they liked him, right? And it's similar to Robin Hood, right? It's similar to Pretty Boy Floyd. It's like, and this happens when people are oppressed and they feel like the government is against them. Often there will be criminals who become kind of an expression, kind of the heroes of the people. This is a really common phenomenon around the world. And in Korea, there had been a social bandit. There had been a criminal who robbed from the rich to feed the poor, who fought the Japanese colonizers and occupiers, whose badass name, Pretty Boy Floyd and the Sundance Kid, his name was Kim Becomes the Sun. And so when Kim Il-sung started leading the revolutionary movement to liberate Korea from the Japanese occupiers, he took on the nickname Kim Becomes the Sun. He started calling himself Kim Il-sung after this social bandit, right? I think that's pretty badass, right? It'd be like if there's some revolutionary leader in Britain who started calling himself Robin Hood, right? That's kind of like what it was, right? Right. There was a revolutionary leader in England. His name was like Joe Smith, but he started calling himself Robin Hood. It was romantic. And it was kind of brilliant, right? And so Kim Il-sung, he took on the name of this social bandit, of this Robin Hood-like figure. That is really cool, right? And Kim Il-sung didn't join the Communist Party, and he didn't join the Social Democratic Party, and he didn't join the Christian Party because he was the leader, the face of the resistance. He was above all the parties. He was just the leader of the Korean people's resistance. I mean, it's fascinating history here. But the point that I was making was that I went to this festival in Quito, Ecuador in 2013, where the North Koreans were there. And that festival was like life-changing for me, right? It was life-changing for me because I was seeing real communists. Let me emphasize that again. I was seeing real communists. The communist parties in India have millions of members. They control a whole region called Kerala. They have huge labor union coalitions they control. The Communist Party in Angola, the MPLA, is the ruling party. They are the main party in the country. The Communist Party in Namibia, the Southwest African People's Organization, SWAPO, they are the ruling party. In South Africa, the Communist Party is the central, one of the most powerful factions within the African National Congress, the ANC, the ruling party, right? There are many countries in the world. You go to Venezuela, the Communist Party and the United Socialist Party are the government, right? The United Socialist Party is the ruling party. The Communist Party also has seats and is and there's some back and forth. There has been some disagreements, but for the most part, for most of the Bolivarian process, they've been in full alliance with the United Socialist Party and with the Bolivarians. But the Communist Party is part of the government in Venezuela, and in most parts of the world where there are big communist parties, they are completely different in the way they operate than American communists are. They're just a completely different animal. They wear suits and ties. They can articulate clear policies. They lead huge organizations that have deep roots among the masses. They're a completely different entity. And in America, I joke, in the United States, if you want to be a communist, you have two choices. I've repeated this, I've said this before, but, on the one hand, you got people like the Spartacist League and the Revolutionary Communist Party, the RCP. You got people like the Workers' World Party. You got, that are just, they're irrelevant. They're ultra left, the Party of Socialism and Liberation. They're people that have protests in the streets, that sell newspapers, that scream and yell and are fringe. They're fringe. They're irrelevant fringe. That's what PSL is. That's what all these little tiny Trotskyite groups are. They're irrelevant fringe. You can be irrelevant fringe on the one hand, or you have groups like DSA and the Communist Party USA that have abandoned their revolutionary principles. They aren't irrelevant fringe. They are part of the Democratic Party. They campaign for Democrats. They are just loyal to the Democrats, and whatever socialism or communism they believe in, it's just on paper. It's just something they go through the motions once a year. They read some Marx, but at the end of the day, they're just working for the Democrats, right? And those are your two choices: be a Democrat sellout or be an irrelevant fringe element. However, all across the world, you have real communist parties that are neither of those things. They are not irrelevant fringe, and they are not sellouts and phonies. They have deep roots among the masses. They have serious ideas and ideology. They're a different thing. And my feeling after going to that festival in 2013 is we need this brand of communism. The communist parties that they've got in India, the communist parties that they've got in Vietnam, the communist parties that they've got in African countries and South American countries. We need that kind of communist party in the United States. That's what we need. All right. And the whole reason that CPI, Center for Political Innovation, came into existence was in order to try and cultivate that kind of politics. And that's why we didn't form a party. Because what would be the point of that? Because a party is a real mass organization. And there's a million of these little tiny sects in the United States that claim to be parties, but they ain't. They're just LARPing. So because it was simply a matter of getting ideas out there and promoting a brand of communism that aspires to build deep roots among the masses, because of that, we called ourselves a think tank. Well, now, since we've reemerged, since the relaunch of CPI, we have dropped think tank. Now the Center for Political Innovation, we call ourselves an education project. We are aimed at educating people about Marxism, about non-synthetic left, non-woke, populist American Marxism. So, but we're not calling ourselves a party, because if we were a party, we would, we'd be like the Democratic Party. We'd be like the Republican Party. We'd have thousands and thousands and millions of members. We'd have people running for office, and we're not that, right? So many of the groups in the United States that call themselves parties are doing themselves a real disservice. And on top of that, I will say that most of the communist groups in America, they fall into, and forgive me for repeating myself, but it's something that needs to be said. They fall into this dualistic delusion. They have two simultaneous delusions at the same time. Right? PSL is like this. The ISO is like this. Well, they're not around anymore, but the Trotskyite groups are like this. They have this in their mind. They have two simultaneous delusions. Two of them. On the one hand, they think we are the vanguard. We are the Bolsheviks of America, right? We are gonna be running the country. We are gonna be taking over. We are the Lenins of America. We are sitting here. We are the party of new type. We're the vanguard. We lead the masses. When we come to power, and they have this whole like LARP, like they are gonna come to power. No, you ain't. Okay, no, you ain't. You're irrelevant. You're fringe. You know, you're running the protest cage for the liberals. No one knows who you are. No one has any idea what you believe. No, you're not. You are not the vanguard. But they have this delusion. Oh yeah, we are the Bolsheviks of America. No, you're not. No, you're not. Right? You're not. You're begging. You're begging, pleading, pushing, and shoving for the opportunity to stage rallies for the Democrats. You're not the vanguard, my friend. I'm sorry. No. And they, so on the one hand, they think they're the Bolsheviks. They ain't. On the other hand, they're just the reason that they just go along with whatever's woke, the reason that they don't push back on identity politics, the reason that they tail after whatever's trendy among the movement is because they say, oh, we're not big enough. We don't have any influence. We're irrelevant. There's nothing we can do that would make a difference. And this is where they get trapped. On the one hand, they have delusions of grandeur. And on the other hand, they have this pessimistic, we can't do anything. We don't matter. Well, those beliefs are both wrong. They're both wrong. Right? And this is interesting. Sigmund Freud, he talked about how part of maturity is getting an accurate sense of your own size and your own power. Did you know this? Very interesting. When a baby is born, a baby thinks it has superpowers. When you were a baby, you thought you had superpowers. Why? Because all you had to do was cry, go, wah, and you got fed, you got changed, you got taken care of. So when you're a baby, you think you are superhuman. You think that you're completely superhuman. You don't have an accurate sense of your own strength. However, as you get older, you start to realize how big you actually are, right? And that, that as you get older, right? So once you stop being a baby, then you start to feel really powerless because children are very, very powerless, right? And but they're very, very powerless. But then as you get even older, right, you start to realize, well, I'm not actually as powerless as I used to be. As I get older, I have more responsibility. And part of college-aged young people, often that's a time where they're transitioning from being a powerless child, a powerless minor, to being a fully empowered adult. And part of college-age people, for me, that was an experience when I was college-age, realizing, oh, I can say no. Oh, I can assert my own, so it's maturity. A big part of maturity is recognizing your actual size and your actual ability. Not thinking you're all powerful, but also not thinking you're powerless. That is a huge part of maturity. And these communist groups they have arrested development. They think that they are all powerful and they think they are completely powerless at the same time. And they are neither of those things. They are neither completely powerless, nor are they all powerful and the Bolsheviks and about to take power. They're neither of those things. But if you can come to terms with the fact of this is what we are capable of doing, this is what we can actually accomplish, then you can make measurable goals. Then you can actually say, okay, because this is what we're able to do, this is a goal that we have. And look, CPI, we're back now. We had a two-month pause, 2-month dissolution. We're back. But in the time that we were before that, from the time that we were founded to the time we had our 2-month pause, we performed miracles. No communist group had ever had a conference like we had in Austin, with the flags and the amount of coverage where, it was like that conference made headlines all over the world, right? The fact check websites had to like run articles about our conference that happened in Austin. And then our conference that happened in Chicago was mentioned in Newsweek fucking magazine. Newsweek had to run an article about it. Do you remember this? Newsweek ran an article about our conference, about the CPI, about the Center for Political Innovation, right? We gave a platform to the Uhuru movement when they were under attack by the FBI. We gave a platform to Tara Reid. We published our edition of the Green Book has sold, like, there's not a day that goes by that another copy. We have sold well over 1,000 copies, almost 2,000 copies of our edition of the Green Book, the first book we ever published. Like, it was massive what we achieved, and we're going to do more. We're back. We've relaunched, and people are rejoining. New memberships, I just checked, and they were going into my spam folder, but now I see them. New memberships are going in, and we're going to do more, right? But we're not a party. We're not the Bolsheviks. We're an educational project. But because we recognize our own size, we can make realistic goals. We can make realistic goals, right? If you're in the PSL, if you're in the CPUSA, if you're in the if you're in the International Marxist Tendency, or the Workers' International League, or the Socialist Revolution, or the Socialist Alternative, or whatever, if you're in that, it's like you have, on the one hand, you're the vanguard. On the other hand, you just have to tail the Democrats because there's nothing you can do. We never fell into that delusion. We said we are capable of doing certain things. We are capable of publishing books. We're capable of staging events. We're capable of having reading groups, of changing the conversation. Look, nobody was talking about patriotic socialism before we, obviously during the 1930s, the CPUSA was talking about it, but nobody talked about it. Nobody talked about it. And then I did Students and Youth for a New America. That was before CPI. We had the youth group, Students and Youth for a New America. And gradually it started happening. And then you got different personalities that started talking about it. And suddenly it became a thing. And it became this thing on the internet. Socialism with American characteristics, patriotic socialism. It became this thing that the whole of Twitter had to be mobilized to silence. We can't have that. No. So being a socialist means you want to destroy the country. It means that America is evil. They just had to, they had to go into this like all out crazy social media campaign against patriotism, against socialist patriotism, because it was so much of a threat. If socialists weren't presenting themselves as crazy, angry teenagers who wanted to burn down the country, they actually looked like, hey, in order to make a better country for working families, we need to move toward a society where the banks, factories, and industries are organized to serve public good and not the profits of a few. Oh, in order to have a better country, we need to dismantle imperialism and raise up oppressed communities. If socialists actually started talking that way, they could actually have an influence among the broad masses of people, and that cannot be tolerated. No, what they want is a Sorelian counter gang. What they want is a deranged group of lunatics that the Democratic Party can call up, and they're like, all right, that Donald Trump is president again. We got to make the country go up in flames. Go to it, guys. And then they go, rah! And they run out and act crazy and alienate everybody and light the American flag on fire and and Antifa and, whatever, and that's what they want, is they want a deranged Sorelian counter gang that they can unleash. It's like a dog. It's like a fighting dog, right? It's like, it's like somebody who has like a fighting dog, right? And they just keep the fighting dog in a cage. That's how most of the communist groups in the United States, they keep them in a cage. They don't have any real influence or any real power. They keep them in a cage. But every so often, you know, there's a situation. They let them out of their pen. They say, go get them. And then they go, roar, you know, and they run, and it's like they attack. It's like, all right, go get them, kill, kill. And the deranged dog jumps on the political opponents. And they say, good job, good job. And then they grab them, and then they put them back in their cage and continue with neoliberalism, right? That's basically what communist groups are in the United States. They are the useful attack dogs, the convenient attack dogs for the higher levels of capital. When the Trump people, when the lower level capitalists, when the, you know, Betsy DeVosses and the Elon Musks and the fracking companies, when they get out of control, when Bernie Marcus of Home Depot and the Koch brothers get out of control, you know, Bill Gates and the Rockefellers and Silicon Valley and Jeff Bezos, they make a few phone calls and they say, all right, let them out of their cage now. And they walk over and they unlock the door, and then PSL and RCP and Workers World come running out and go, Rawr! And they jump on them, and Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates sit there and laugh, and they're like, look at our crazy fighting dog. And they harass the right wing a little bit, and then Jeff Bezos laughs, and then and then Bill Gates laughs, and then they grab them by the collar and drag them right back to their cage, and they shut the door and say, isn't that cute? Oh, isn't that cute? And then they continue driving down living standards, and they continue escalating the threats against Russia and China and moving us closer to World War III. You know, I mean, it's just that's all these communist groups are. Whereas we, at the Center for Political Innovation, we said, no, we don't want to be that. Right? We want to accurately measure our own strength. We want to have influence among the population. What are we capable of doing? We're capable of publishing books. We're capable of having conferences. We're capable of changing the conversation. We're capable of breaking the rules. Capable of breaking the rules and talking about patriotic socialism, where you don't alienate the whole population. Oh, socialism with American characteristic, where we don't pretend we're LARPing from another country. We admit that the socialism in America will come out of the traditions of our own history and our own culture. You know, oh my God, we talk about out of the movement to the masses. We don't just go along with whatever leftism is doing. You know, this is what we're capable of doing. We can change the conversation, right? And that shows a level of political maturity, and we got it. And that's why we were able to accomplish so much so quickly. And that's why, you know, we're back, right? And we got more plans. We got plenty of things planned. We're rebuilding the structure of the organization right now, and everything's going well, right? And that this is how serious political forces tend to operate. And in North Korea, those folks are serious, right? There's nobody more serious than the Korean Workers' Party. Any other government in the world would have fallen under what they've faced. I mean, the Korean Workers' Party is a very, very serious group. So my hope is that if the Republicans want to have better relations with North Korea, that the Center for Political Innovation, that we can be an essential part of that process. That's my hope. You know, got my writings of Kim Il-sung here, but I also wanted to mention, I don't know if people are aware, some people may be aware, some won't. I actually published while I was away during my little pause, when I was having ankle surgery, right? When I was having ankle surgery, I'm joking. I didn't really have ankle surgery, but I published this, which is this is called Capitalism Must Be Destroyed. This is a compilation of different articles that I wrote between the years of 2007 and 2015. It's 8 years of writing that I did, most of which I published in Workers' World newspaper, some of which was on RT.com, some of which was in New Eastern Outlook magazine. So I actually put out this volume of writings. It's not a short thing. It's almost 400. It's almost 500 pages. No, almost 400 pages, right? And actually, I was thinking about it today because there's a lot about North Korea in here. I have a section of articles called The Socialist World. And if you open up the book, right, you know, This is the table of contents, right? You've got fight the cuts, dissecting war propaganda. Those are the first two sections. Section three is the socialist world. And it's got stuff I wrote about when I went to Venezuela, letter from Caracas. It's got stuff about China, and, it's got stuff about North Korea. It's got two different articles about North Korea. One of which is an article that I wrote called Let's Talk About Korea, which I think is an important piece, and we got other sections in this book. We got a section on, the class struggle in the United States, and I just preserved these writings. I thought it was an important thing to do. But yeah, I have an article in here called Let's Talk About Korea. And, in it, I go over the history of North and South Korea. I go over the history of North Korea and what we've been lied to about, etc. I've got a picture in here of Kim Il-sung visiting factory workers. And, this is a piece that needs to be preserved. So I just wanted to mention that, so this is available now. Capitalism Must Be Destroyed. And I have given one to every Patreon supporter that I have, also, a lot of, if you want to rejoin, if you want to reactivate your Patreon membership, that would be awesome. I am in the process. I'm actually sending a message to everyone who's ever been a member of the Patreon. Should go out in a few days. But if you want to rejoin, if you want to reactivate your Patreon membership, now that I've got a whole room to stream in, right, and I've got, I'm working from home primarily, I'm going to do a lot more for the Patreon people. I feel like when I was running around the country doing CPI events, I kind of neglected the Patreon folks a bit, and I feel bad about that. I honestly feel guilty. And a lot of the Patreon people continued supporting me even during the temporary shutdown. I sent a nice letter to all the Patreon supporters and said, look, we're just taking a temporary retreat here. And there were a number of them that said, you know what, we're going to continue pledging, even though I wasn't doing anything streams. And so I did, while I was away, I did publish this book, and I gave one as a gift to all my Patreon supporters. So that was something I could do while I was away. And it was a good use of my time. But listen, folks, we do have super chats we need to get to. So why don't we do the roll call, and I'll call you all out as I see you, names and locations, right? And then from there, I'll start answering these super chat questions, because we get a lot of them. And if you want more super chats, that's fine. We'll keep going until we run out of super chats here. So names and locations. I'm going to call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. And then I will start answering the many super chat questions that have come in. So who's with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? Temple City, California. Ryan in California. Cleveland, Pirate Alex. Melbourne. New England. Los Angeles, Ishmael. We got St. George in Utah. Elizabeth in Portland. Shout out to you, Elizabeth. Elizabeth in Portland, shout out to you. George from Washington State. Talent, Oregon. Killian from Milwaukee. Kieran from San Diego, shout out to you. Heidi Edelweiss in Edinburgh. It's got to be late over there. I got Gavin, live from Synthetic Left Central Knox College. All right. Alex from Brazil. Mindanao to Midwest. Lumpia Logic is with us, right? We got Max Wells in Tennessee. Jared in Virginia. Bob Troy in New York. Finn in Duluth, Jenny Lynn from Cincinnati, Bob Troy in New York, Effingham, Illinois, right? We got Ziris Demori from Denmark, Ziris Demori. We got Mark from Syracuse. We got Ottawa, Canada, work in progress. Andres from Sao Paulo, Brazil, right? We got Fernando in Woodland, California. We got, wow, this is great. Anybody else? Names and locations. We'll keep calling them out here for a little bit. Names and locations. We got Yiho from Taiwan, China. We got Micah from Las Vegas. Good stuff. Fernando from Woodland, California. All righty. Very, very good. Very, very good. Very, very good. Very, very good. All right. We got... Who else? We got Carter from Duluth. We got Jim from Harrisburg, PA. Right? Good times. Good times. Anybody else? We got Oakland PSYOP. We got PSYOP from Oakland. All right. Try not to PSYOP us too hard there. We got Juan from Quito, Ecuador. Quito, Ecuador. All righty. We got John Whitty in Houston. We got Mike in North Carolina. We got Jim in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We got Carl in Washington. We got Brock from LaSalle, Illinois. We got Tetsu in Phoenix, Arizona. Auckland, New Zealand, Stephen Clearly. Good stuff, folks. Good stuff. Good stuff, folks. All right. So now I'm going to start answering super chat questions. We got a lot left over from this afternoon. And if you have another one, we already had a couple come in tonight. If you have another super chat, by all means, shoot it my way and I'll add it to the list. All right. First question. What is your opinion of Catholicism? And can you be a Catholic communist? Well, Catholicism is a religion, right? And I tend to respect all religions, right? Especially Abrahamic faiths, right? Judaism, Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, Taoism, Buddhism. I tend to respect religions, right? My personal religion is I am a Protestant Christian, but I tend to respect religions. I am not Catholic. And, it's interesting because I'm Irish. Urban Irish people are your cops and your firemen, your city officials, right? You go around the country, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Chicago, the cops tend to all be Irish Catholics. New York City, right? They talk, why do they call it a paddy wagon? It wasn't just, people think it's a stereotype about drunken Irish getting rounded up and thrown in the wagon. Well, it's not just that. It's also Paddy's driving the wagon, right? It was the NYPD. You watch old movies, the police officer always has a brogue. In the old 1940s movies, the police officer always talks like this. It was Irish people in America. You have your urban Irish people. They tend to be Catholics, and they are urban, and they came to the United States over the course of hundreds of years, but mainly in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and they are Roman Catholic, and they were fleeing persecution at the hands of the British, man-made famines and genocide. And that's the stereotype about they like to drink and they, and the Irish bars and the long live the IRA and all that. That's not me, right? I look like those people. I've got red hair. But my family on both sides, on my mom's side and my dad's side, we're both Irish, but we are Protestant Irish. And my family is rural in its background, actually. Very rural. On my mother's side and my father's side, they're rural folks. My dad's family's from Missouri. My mother's family's from Ohio, and they're rural. And they both sides were here before the American Revolution, right? On both sides. I did a genealogy project when I was a kid. So, I am an Irish American, but I am Protestant. And in fact, my mother's family, they were very Protestant. There's people that were founders of Oberlin College that I'm descended from. And, and those folks, they didn't believe in drinking alcohol, right? They thought drinking alcohol was a sin, right? A lot of my mother's family, they had this belief that alcohol was sinful, right? And they did not drink. It was just not a thing that you do, right? And that, that on both sides, I am Irish. I'm heavily Irish, but I'm a Protestant and Scotch Irish, right? It's Scotch Irish, as they call it, right? Protestant, Scotch Irish. Why do I have a French last name? My last name is Maupin, right? Which is a French name. Why is that? Because of the Huguenots, right? In France, there was a group of Protestants they called Huguenots. And the Huguenots were capitalists, basically, in feudal France who converted to Protestantism to challenge the feudal order. And so they were kicked out of the country. And so the British took them in and took them to Northern Ireland to kick around the Catholics, right? And so that's why a lot of Irish Protestants have French last names, is because the Huguenots, because they were Protestant, the British sent them to Northern Ireland. So I have a French last name. So, but yeah, I'm Irish on, I mean, I'm an Irish American. I've never been to Ireland, but I'm Irish in my heritage on both sides, but I'm Protestant. So, somebody got mad on one of these streams. They're like, "How are you Irish, Caleb?" There's someone from Ireland who was watching, and they got very angry that I referred to myself as Irish. So I'm Irish American. Okay. I've never been to Ireland, right? And Irish culture and Irish American culture are very different, right? That stereotype about drinking, for example, that's a very Irish American thing, right? There's a lot of things associated with Irish American culture that I would argue is urban cops and firemen who are Roman Catholic. So it's not even all Irish Americans, but also has nothing to do with Ireland, right? And my family hasn't been in Ireland for 200 years, right? So, I mean, my heritage is Irish, but yeah, I'm Protestant and all of that. But anyway, back to the question. What was the question? Well, the question was, what do I think of Catholicism? Well, I mean, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to make a theological critique and explain why the Vatican is wrong and why Martin Luther had to nail his thesis to the door and why Ulrich Zwingli had to lead the Swiss to reject? I mean, what do you want me to say, right? I mean, obviously, I don't recognize the Vatican. Obviously, I do not recognize the infallibility of the Pope. But I respect people's right to do so. Catholicism is it's a different religion. It is not my religion, right? And one of my pet peeves, I will say, right, is that, if you are a Christian, for the most part, you're either Orthodox, like in Russia or Greece, or the Coptic Christians in Egypt, or you're Catholic, meaning you recognize the Vatican, or you're Protestant, right? Mormons are technically Protestants, if you want to get down to it, right? People say, well, they're a sect, but they're technically Protestants, right? Because they come out of Protestantism, right? There are some fundamental Baptists, who will get all fired up and explain to you they are not Protestant. And it's really annoying because, okay, I get it. You're the one true religion, blah, 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 blah. You're Protestant. And they're like, no. We're not Protestant. We're not Catholic. We're just Christian. We're the true followers of Jesus. It's like, okay, I get it. And then they actually go through the history of the Roman Catholic Church, and they find various heretics who were burned at the stake, by the Catholic Church, and find like overlap between these heretics' beliefs and their beliefs, and try to argue, well, their religion was always around. There were Baptists that were always around, like they are descended straight from Jesus or something. And it's a little annoying. I find that to be a little annoying, right? I do find that to be a little bit annoying because it's historically dishonest, right? They're stretching things. Baptism comes from Anabaptism, right? The Catholic Church began the tradition of when your baby is born, you sprinkle water on their head. You baptize the baby, right? That's the tradition I grew up. I was baptized as a child. When I was born, as a baby, I was baptized. My family, at the time that I was born, my family was attending a Lutheran church. Now, later, I didn't grow up in that church. 2 or 3 years after I was born, we joined another church, but I was actually baptized in a Lutheran church. I was a little baby, and they sprinkled water on my head. That's how most Christians do it. Baptism is done by, the baby is born, and then you have the christening or the baptism of the baby. You sprinkle water on their head. Well, in Germany and in Switzerland and in France, during the Protestant Reformation, there was a group of people who said, whoa, hold up. A baby that's just been born cannot decide to accept Christ because they're a baby. So you cannot baptize babies. It doesn't count. If you're baptized as a baby, you obviously go to hell because you didn't make the choice. When you get baptized, it has to be your choice. So they came along, and a group of people who said they were against infant baptism emerged. They were called Anabaptists. And it's out of the Anabaptists that you get Baptists, right? It's also, you get the Amish, you get the Mennonites, You get a lot of the quote unquote sects of Protestants, the more evangelical, and evangelical isn't even the right term, but a lot of the more fundamentalist Protestants, a lot of the more, I don't know what you want to call them, more radical, more fanatical Protestants come out of the Anabaptist current. Whereas, you have what are called mainline Protestants. That's how I grew up. The church I grew up in is part of what was at one point called the Congregational Church, right? It's now called the United Church of Christ. I grew up in that church, right? And that is what you call a mainline Protestant church. The Congregational Church, that was the Puritans, right? That's an old New England church, right? The Episcopal Church, the Methodist Church, the Presbyterian Church, the Lutheran Church. These are what they call mainline Protestants, right? These are Protestants, and their beliefs, at least on a national level, at a higher up level, their beliefs tend to be very liberal. Now, locally, that's not always true, right? In a small town, in an area, they might be very, very conservative, but like the United Church of Christ at a national level, they believe in gay marriage. They have gay ministers, they baptize, marry, and bury gay people, and a lot of these churches, Methodists, Lutherans, on a national level, they're somewhat liberal, right? Mainline Protestants. Locally, not always the case. Locally, they can be very conservative when they're in conservative areas, and they tend to have a lot of autonomy. That's another thing about mainline Protestant churches, is they tend to have a lot of autonomy for local churches. The way you do it in your local area, you can do it. They don't mess with you. However, that's most Protestants, I guess, are mainline Protestants, right? But then you have evangelicals or fundamentalists, and they're a different brand of things. They're Protestants, but they are very, very radical, right? And they're not very liberal. They tend to be, those are the conservatives. Those are the fanatics, right? And that's a whole nother thing that we could talk about. And it gets very complicated because it's like, fundamentalists are very adamant they're not evangelicals. Evangelicals are adamant that they are not fundamentalists. There are big differences in all of this, right? And so this is all complicated. And anyway, you're asking me what I think of Catholicism. Again, I'm not going to get up here. I'm not going to I think that would be rude. There are probably a lot of Catholics watching. And if I were to sit here and explain to you all of my personal theological differences with Catholicism, that would be rude. That would not be polite. You don't do that, right? But I will say this. I actually was impressed. When I was in college, there was a good friend of mine who had gone to a Catholic high school. And she told me the Catholic critique of Marxism. And I was impressed. I was deeply impressed. Because the standard religious critique of Marxism that I always heard from all Christians was Karl Marx was an atheist who didn't believe in God. Communists persecuted Christians and want to kill all Christians. Only God can create heaven on earth. So communism is a heresy, and communism is anti-God, and communism is the devil. That's what I'd always heard. That was the standard. That's what I expected she would say. When she said, oh, well, this is what they taught us about communism in Catholic school, I thought, oh, here we go, right? They kill Christians, they kill priests and nuns, they're atheists, and they believe in gay marriage, and, they're satanic, and they want to build heaven on earth, and only God can do it, so they're Satan. That's what I thought. That's what I expected they would say. And this friend of mine who had gone to a Franciscan high school, she told me what they taught her at her Franciscan high school was that Marxism believes in economic determinism, that your actions are based on your material circumstances. And the Catholic Church believes that the role of religion and the role of God is to motivate people to do the right thing, even when it is against their interests. And so Catholicism rejects Marxism because they reject materialism and economic determinism. They believe you have the ability, you have free will to do right and wrong, regardless of your circumstances. I was actually impressed. I was highly impressed because that means that some priests actually read Karl Marx and actually understood what Marxism was and dug into the Marxist teachings and actually understood what it was and came up with a legit critique. I was impressed. So that's a positive thing that I can say about Catholicism, and that the critique they have of Marxism is honestly a legitimate one. I've said on these streams here that I'm not a full-on materialist. I do believe in God, and I do think that Karl Marx, there was an element of just seeing people as animals, people that are just spending their whole life avoiding pain and seeking out pleasure, right? That were rats in a maze, right? And that he underestimated the spiritual power of man. And I think that's actually a very intelligent, well thought out critique of Marxism. So, I was impressed. And that's because the Catholic Church is a huge institution that has members all over the world in countries where there are big communist parties like France and Spain and Italy. And they couldn't do the lazy understanding of Marxism that you get from most American Christians, which is, oh, Marx was an atheist, opium of the people. They couldn't do that. And so I was impressed. So that's a positive thing I will say about Catholicism. Can you be a Catholic communist? I think you can. Now, the Pope doesn't think you can, right? The Pope is critical of both capitalism, but he rejects Marxism. He's been very clear. He rejects any form of liberation theology that embraces Marxism. The Catholic Church is against Marxism. But Nicolas Maduro is a Roman Catholic. Hugo Chavez was a Roman Catholic. The Sandinistas of Nicaragua are officially Roman Catholics. So, there are many, many communists in the world. I know what distributism is, but is that officially recognized by the Vatican? I think that's like Catholic, conservative, traditionalist Catholic economic theory. I don't know if that's official. I know what distributism is. But anyway, I don't know if you're right about that. You could be. I don't know enough about it. But there are many Marxist leaders around the world that profess Catholicism as their religious beliefs. So it's not on me to say they're not real Catholics. Who am I to say Maduro is not a real Catholic? Who am I to say that Daniel Ortega is not a real Catholic? Who am I to say that Evo Morales wasn't a real Catholic? I mean, they called themselves Roman Catholic, and they were Marxists. And they are Marxist leaders. Hugo Chavez was a Marxist leader. So Hugo Chavez said that Jesus was the greatest socialist in all of history. I read the speech Hugo Chavez said, nothing can stop the socialist revolution in Venezuela. It was like one of his inauguration speeches. And it was all quotes from the Bible about, communism and Marxism and feeding the poor. I mean, it was great stuff. So there you go. I think that it's very possible to be a Roman Catholic and a communist, but it's not for me to say, right? I mean, I believe at the end of the day, that's up to the Pope. And I think the Pope says you can't be a Marxist and a Christian, if I'm not mistaken. That's my understanding. I don't know. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't think there's any problem, right? I don't think there's any problem. Like I said, if you're a 100% pure Marxist, you can't have any religion, right? Because Marx was an atheist and a pure materialist. I ain't that. So, I draw heavily from the Marxist-Leninist tradition. That is the ideology I'm the most familiar with, the biggest influence on me. But I also study Christian socialism. I also study Baathism. I also study the Islamic Revolution of Iran. I study Bolivarianism. I study Deng Xiaoping theory. I am influenced by many different anti-imperialist and revolutionary currents, and I'm eclectic that way, right? ML is the cutting edge. I mean, I shouldn't say it's the cutting edge. ML, Marxism-Leninism, because of the Soviet Union, Marxism-Leninism kind of set the tone for all anti-imperialist and anti-capitalist movements from the 20th century forward, right? African socialism, Kwame Nkrumah, he was not a Marxist-Leninist. He rejected Marxism, said it wasn't African. But if you read his book, Neo-Colonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism, it's a Leninist book. I mean, all of his understanding of imperialism is drawn from Lenin. That book is heavily, heavily Leninist, right? In the Baath tradition, Baathist Arab socialism, again, They have differences. They embrace Islam. They talk about the Arab people, the need for a new Arab Renaissance and stuff. But their understanding of imperialism comes straight out of Lenin. Their understanding of what socialism is, right, is very Marxist, public control of the means of production, their critique of capitalism. They teach Marx in the schools in Syria and in Iraq. They did, they have their own unique Ba'athist Arab spin on it, but Marxism set the tone, right? You wouldn't have Baathism is a spin-off from Marxism, right? It was a break with Marxism. Michel Aflaq was a member of the Syrian Communist Party, and the Syrian Communist Party said not to fight the French colonizers because of World War II, because the French were in an alliance with the United States and Britain against the Nazis. They had to stop resisting French colonialism. And Michel Aflaq said, no, I want to fight the French colonialists. So he split away from the Communist Party and he formed the Ba'ath Party, right? Well, still Marxism set the tone, right? And Bolivarianism, right? Bolivarian socialism in Latin America. It's not classic ML, but if you read Marta Harnacker, who is one of the main ideologues of Bolivarian socialism, 21st century socialism in Latin America, Marta Harnacker, they've republished a lot of her stuff in English, Monthly Review and all that. You read it, it's heavily influenced by ML, right? Heavily influenced by Marxism-Leninism. So Marxism-Leninism was like the very foundation, right? You didn't have non-capitalist societies. You didn't have societies that had overturned Western capitalism and broken out of Western dominance and replaced it with a higher form until you had the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was the first socialist revolution that stayed in power. So because of that, their ideology set the tone. Bolshevism, we should really call it Bolshevism, right? The Bolshevik interpretation of Marxism that after Lenin's death, Stalin named it Marxism-Leninism. That really is the foundation. Look, the Islamic Revolution of Iran, right? They reject Marxism. They're opposed to it, but their understanding of imperialism is heavily influenced by Lenin. Their concept of the councils, the Basij councils that they have in Iran and all the neighborhoods, they're modeled on the committees to defend the revolution and the Soviets that they had in the Soviet Union. So it's like even the Islamic Revolution of Iran that was very anti-communist in its rhetoric and ideology, it drew its analysis of the world and it drew a lot of its organizational forms from ML. So, ML, Marxism-Leninism, has had a huge influence. There's not going to be, you're going to have a revolutionary movement that's against Western capitalism and imperialism, but striving to build a non-capitalist socialist society. ML, Marxism-Leninism, is going to make a huge stamp on it, right? And that's why you need to know ML, right? And the worst kind of revisionist is someone who doesn't know what they're revising, right? That's one of my biggest pet peeves is when people come along and they want to say ML is wrong, but they don't know what ML is, right? You need to understand what ML is, you need to understand Marxism-Leninism in order to critique it. I am critical of Marxism-Leninism. Like I said, I believe in God. I believe in spiritual power. I don't think that only Marxist-Leninist societies are socialist. I think Gaddafi's Libya was socialist. I think that, the Bolivarian countries, Venezuela was socialist, is socialist. Nicaragua is socialist. I am not a strict ML, but in order to do that, I had to thoroughly understand ML. And nothing annoys me more. Nothing annoys me more than revisionists who do not know that which it is they are revising. And it was hard to find it. I remember when I first got interested in communism, I was looking for difference between a reformer and a revisionist. All right. I was looking for Marxist literature, and I found so many books that were written in like the 70s, 80s, and 90s by academics that were saying, oh, we got to get away from dogmatic Marxism-Leninism. We got to get away from this dogmatic Marxism-Leninism. The Soviet Union fell because of their dogmatic Marxism-Leninism. And there's this dogmatic Marxism that's everywhere. And it's so obnoxious and it's bad and it's hurting the women's movement and it's hurting the labor movement. It's hurting the anti-war movement. All this dogmatic Marxism everywhere, right? I couldn't find this dogmatic Marxism anywhere. I mean, I was reading everywhere about how bad this dogmatic Marxism was and how it was everywhere and it was so bad. I couldn't find any dogmatic Marxist literature. It wasn't until I started reading William Z. Foster and old CPUSA pamphlets and books from the 1930s. That was like the only place I could find any of that old dogmatic Marxism-Leninism, because, you know, I found all this literature explaining why if you wanted to be a Marxist, you had to not be that dogmatic old Marxist-Leninist authoritarian stuff. You can't be that. That's awful. You got to reject that authoritarian dogmatic. I couldn't find this authoritarian dogmatic Marxism-Leninism that was everywhere. I couldn't find it. And that's why when I found it to be amazingly profound. When I read Towards Soviet America by William Z. Foster, you know, when I read eventually The History of the Three Internationals, when I read The Fundamentals of Marxism-Leninism, the Soviet textbook, when I read the History of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union short course, that stuff is very good. Right? And I recommend you read that before you read the classics. I started reading the classics and I didn't get it. I read Imperialism by Lenin. I couldn't make heads or tails of it. I tried to. We want this to be done. But after I had read the foundations, after I'd read like textbooks that explained it, from there, I could really get into, right? After you get the context, you know what the First International was, you know what the Second International was, you know who the Bolsheviks were, you know, once you know that stuff, then when you read The State and Revolution, or you read What Is to Be Done, or you read, you know, these texts, they make sense, right? And that often people go straight to the big texts. The big texts are all polemical. In Marxism, we have a polemical tradition. The way we write in Marxism is very much polemical. That's why these breadtube people are so stupid, all right? They have when I wrote the breadtube book, Breadtube Serves Imperialism, so many of these people were like, oh my God, you wrote a whole book about breadtube? What a loser. A Marxist writing books about other Marxists? That never happens. Let me show you here. You know what this book is? This book I've got here. Anti-Düring. Engels wrote a whole book about Düring. He was so mad about this Marxist and the socialist in Germany named Düring. He wrote a whole book about Düring. What a loser. Oh my God. I mean, this is Frederick Engels, Anti-Düring. All right. Proletarian Revolution and the Renegade Kautsky. Wow, Lenin was just so upset about Kautsky that he wrote a whole book about Kautsky. Oh my God, what a loser. Critique of the Gotha program. Oh my God, Karl Marx was so upset by these guys in Gotha, Germany, who wrote a program that he wrote a whole book called The Critique of the Gotha Program. Need I go on? No, but it's just like when these breadtube people, they like don't understand that polemics, Marxists writing critiques of other Marxists, leftists writing critiques of other leftists, that is like the most common thing for a leftist to do. And when I said things like, if Lenin were alive today, he would write a book about breadtube, and they think that's like stupid, you know? Oh, that's so stupid. That's so stupid. Well, you know, no, it's not actually. If there was a major voice in the United States espousing Marxism before millions or hundreds of thousands of people, Maduro is based, they would want to put forward a critique of it, right? That's just common sense. These people, they cannot understand this. They know absolutely nothing about the history of our movement and its tradition. They think the idea that you would write a whole book about people with different views, I think that's just absurd. It's really, really annoying. It's really, really annoying. But anyway, I was, the history of our movement, it's important. ML, you need to know ML. if you're going to be an anti-capitalist, an anti-imperialist organizer, you need to know ML. And once you know ML, once you really know ML, then you can start to critique ML. And I encourage people. I am not, for a long time, I had the perspective that the reason the Soviet Union fell was because people deviated from the pure Marxist-Leninist line. I don't think that anymore, right? And we got other questions that relate to this, so I should keep going because we got more questions. But anyway, all right. Can the USA be considered a revolutionary capitalist state because it exports capitalism all over the world? Well, I mean, does it export capitalism all over the world, or does it export neoliberalism all over the world? Because I think, there are, for the most part, feudalism has largely been uprooted in the world, right? There are elements of feudalism in certain parts of the world, but for the most part, other than, like Nepal, for a long time, there was like feudal relations in the countryside. But for the most part, we have capitalism in most of the world. What the United States exports largely is neoliberalism, which is unregulated capitalism, which is, Milton Friedman, Ludwig von Mises, Friedrich von Hayek, Montpellier Society economics, right? The USA imposes that. But around the world, most of the world is capitalist, right? If it's not socialist, it's capitalist. There's very little feudalism. You could argue that the early days of colonialism and the rise of imperialism, that yes, the United States, Britain, France, Germany, they were exporting capitalism, overturning feudal relations in the countries they conquered, etc. But now, no, the USA is, these countries are already capitalist. Chile was already capitalist. It had a socialist president, but it was already capitalist when they, toppled Allende and installed Pinochet, but they brought in neoliberalism, right? What the USA tends to export is not capitalism. It's a particular form of capitalism, highly unregulated capitalism, free trade, and neoliberalism. But you could argue that. And I've often made the analogy that like the neocons are like the Trotskyites, except the permanent revolution they want is a capitalist revolution, right? That they believe in like globalism. They believe in unrest and instability and chaos and war. It's just they don't want the socialism part, right? It's Trotskyism without Marxism, right? It's that bloodlust, that instability, that cosmopolitanism, that lack of loyalty to any country, that belief in permanent instability, but for capitalism, not for Marxism. And actually, I'm not the first person to say that. That was actually a very widespread critique of neoconservative thought during the Bush years. Many people, especially many libertarians, made that connection to, the neocons, they're former Trotskyites. They don't believe in Marxism anymore, but they believe in permanent revolution. But anyway, next question. 1970s Maoists who tailed anti-busing right-wingers. Yeah, I've talked about that. In the 1970s, school busing was happening. School integration. They would bus kids to different neighborhoods, so black and white kids would go to the same schools. And there were racist riots against it. And most of the communists, okay, I'll just break it down real quick. So the Communist Party, they supported busing. They said busing is a measure to fight racism. Socialist Workers Party, they supported busing. They said school busing, school integration is a way to fight racism. Most of the black community supported busing. They wanted their kids to go to better schools. However, there was black nationalism, and black nationalism was very big in the 70s. The Black Panthers, the Nation of Islam, they did not support busing. They wanted black schools for black children, right? And they wanted control over the schools in the black community, and they wanted more funding for the schools in the black community, but they did not want school integration. They wanted black schools. They're separatists, right? A lot of black nationalists are separatist in that way. But most of the black community rejected black nationalism. They wanted school integration. The Communist Party wanted school integration. Socialist Workers Party wanted school integration. But among the harder left groups, right? Socialist Workers Party, they were the Trotskyites that staged all the big peaceful legal anti-war rallies. Communist Party USA was this group that was aligned with the Soviet Union, that was kind of invisible and campaigned for the Democratic Party and was very secretive. You wouldn't know they existed, but you had, the hard left, the visible communists, SWP, and CPUSA. They were this communist faction among liberal activists, kind of. But then among the visible communist groups, the Maoists, the hardliners, right, there were different opinions. And the Workers' World Party, they took the opinion, they took the position, they said, we say no to racism. And they built a very big march, not for busing, but against racism, because they didn't want to reject the black nationalists who opposed busing. But they also saw that the anti-busing riots, the racist anti-busing riots, that they were no good. And so they built a huge march in 1974 called "We Say No to Racism." And it was huge, and it was organized by the Workers' World Party. The October League, which was one of the big Maoist groups, they didn't say that they opposed busing, but they would publish articles by black nationalists who opposed busing. So it was like they were highlighting voices in the black community that opposed busing, right? And they pushed the black belt concept, right? The Communist Party had at one point said that black people in the United States have the right to form a separate black republic, the Black Belt South. And so because of that, right, they said, okay, well, black nationalists are an expression of the black belt, right? And so they supported black nationalists who opposed busing. It was the Revolutionary Union, the RU, which eventually became the Revolutionary Communist Party the next year, 1975. They became the Revolutionary Communist Party. That's the Bobavakian people. But they were much bigger back then. Bobavakian was the leader, but there were a lot more people in it. There were a lot of people in different factions. They were a China-aligned party, probably the biggest China-aligned party, based in San Francisco. They came out of the Bay Area. The Revolutionary Union. They supported the racist riots. Right? They actually had a headline in their newspaper, workers unite to smash busing. And they basically argued that since the solution to racism was communism, not busing, and because these were working class people that were, bombing school buses and, throwing rocks at black students when they came to a school in a white neighborhood and doing these racist things, that somehow it was a workers' movement or something like that. And many people were horrified that they took that position. But the reason that they took that position, I now realize, the reason they took that position was that they were trying to do out of the movement to the masses, right? There had been the big hippie counterculture of the 60s. And that had died. And the Maoist groups, the October League, the Revolutionary Union, they were trying to some degree or other, to do out of the movement to the masses. Unfortunately, at that point, there was still a huge aristocracy of labor in the United States. Living standards were very high. So because of that, it didn't work. I mean, average white working class people who worked in factories told them to go screw themselves. They said, we love our country. We love America. Go move to another country, right? The living standards in the United States in the early 70s, even in the late 70s, were very high. So average white American workers were not interested in joining communist groups. And the Revolutionary Communist Party and the October League and the Communist Workers' Party, they got jobs in factories, and they tried to form communist reading groups among their workers. They tried to form communist factions among their co-workers, and it didn't work. It just didn't work. But because they had this understanding that they did want to break out of the left, which was a good understanding. They did want to get out of the counterculture. They made a mistake. And I'm working on doing some writing about this, because I want to talk about the Boston Trap. Because the reason that PSL and Workers' World and a lot of these groups lost their minds is because, based on what happened, in Boston, they've fallen into this belief that, look how bad the RCP was. Look how bad the October League is, because they went along with something that was right-wing, or something that was racist. In that case, it was racist. It wasn't just right-wing. It was racist. And they've taken from Boston in 1974, this belief that you should never go along with the right wing. And that's why in our time, the left has completely lost its mind. Because right now, any anti-establishment sentiment is labeled right wing. That's what these people fucking don't understand, right? You're not allowed to criticize the FBI on the left, you fuckers. Do you get this? If you go to a group of socialists, DSA people, if you go to a group of people who think they're Marxists and you're like, hey, you know, the FBI, like, they're awful and they repress people, they'll say, you must be a Trumper conspiracy theorist. You should have your Facebook shut down. You should be thrown in jail. I'm serious. If I made a video today why the FBI was wrong and some Patreon sent it to Vosh, Vosh would go on there and he'd say, you know, if I made a video on COINTELPRO today and someone sent it to Vosh, he would show it on his channel and say, now this is Caleb supporting Donald Trump by saying that our FBI is, I mean, this is nuts. What Maoist group were you part of? All right. I'll write it down. I'll get to that. You know, you're not allowed to criticize the FBI on the left. You know, for a long time, critique of big pharma was a left-wing thing. You know, it was leftists who were pushing alternative medicine, who were critical of big pharma. Not anymore. Not anymore. If you say, oh, I'm not sure about these vaccines, you must be a right-winger, you must be a fascist, you should be shut down, you're critical, you know, right? It used to be the left wing were the people that opposed the wars. But now, if you say, hey, maybe we shouldn't be sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. Oh my God, you're a Putin apologist. You're a Nazbol. You're a white supremacist. The left is completely controlled. And opposing the state and state repression, that used to be what leftists were all about. That is not allowed on the left anymore. You're not allowed to do that anymore. Opposing U.S. foreign policy. You're not allowed to do that anymore. Questioning big pharma. You're not allowed to do that anymore. You know, questioning anything is conspiracy theories. So they have conveniently, in the name of giving U.S. imperialism a woke progressive makeover, they have labeled any dissident idea as right wing. However, because of what happened in Boston in 1974, and because of, you know, all this stuff that happened in the 70s with the new communist movement and all of that, a lot of the communist groups have said, well, we don't want to be like the RU. We don't want to be like the Revolutionary Communist Party. You know, we can't do that. Look, they sided with the right wing. Look how awful that was. And I call that the Boston trap. The Boston trap. And that's what leads you to support Biden. And that's what leads you to, support, at this point, to support World War III against Russia. That's why, the PSL, does leaps and backflips to try to be somewhat neutral on Ukraine. I mean, it's, look at Abby Martin and Micah, what's that guy's name? Mike, I don't even remember what his first name is. Some of the tweets they've made about Ukraine are insane. They support the Russian peace movement, which is the peace movement in Russia, which is, college kids that are pro-American and hate Russia. It's not communist. It's not leftist. It's, liberal, pro-Western kids, Mike Feisner, they said, I kid you not, Mike, what's his name? He tweeted out, someone sent me a tweet he made, and I was just like, is this for real? And he said it was great that all these people were running around with Ukrainian flags because that was their opening to internationalism, right? This is the Boston trap. It's what liberals are doing, so it must be good. And you don't want to be right wing. Don't want to be right wing. The Boston trap. And that's the problem. So next question. Thoughts on the passing of Gorbachev? Well, you don't want to speak ill of the dead, but, obviously Gorbachev played a very big role in the fall of the Soviet Union. Gorbachev is widely hated in Russia. I mean, he was, a wildly unpopular person. A lot of people that weren't even communists felt like he completely messed things up. The result of his actions was economic devastation of the former Soviet Union. I mean, his policies that ultimately led to dismantling the Soviet Union, they also made life pretty bad. Russia in the 1990s, their economy was bad. Their population was going down. I mean, these are just basic economic facts. The fall of the Soviet Union and the implementation of neoliberal free market capitalism under Yeltsin was a disaster, and Gorbachev is largely blamed for that. So there you go. It's time to restore chaos. A quote from, it'll take time to restore the chaos. From, that's what Bush said. Well, it's interesting that, Bush, I remember when the Bush administration, they were in their second term, when Condoleezza Rice became Secretary of State. And there was, remember when Israel was attacking Lebanon. I remember Condoleezza Rice, she talked about the violence in Iraq, the violence in Lebanon. And she said, these are the birth pangs of a new Middle East. Remember that? She said they were the birth pangs of a new Middle East. And it was like this belief that, we're spreading democracy. We're giving the Iraqi people a chance at freedom. We're causing all this instability and chaos around the world. But don't worry, it's going to lead to freedom and democracy and modernization in the Middle East. That's what they were telling everybody. And it's like, if you want to talk about an unfulfilled prophecy, if you want to talk about people getting it epically wrong, I mean, Iraq did not become stable. It did not become a prosperous democracy. Afghanistan did not become stable. It did not become a prosperous democracy. The Bush administration fomented chaos around the world in order to secure a monopoly for Wall Street. And they got it, right? An oil exporting country was blown to bits. Another oil exporting country had horrendous sanctions put on it, Iran. It's like the results of the Bush administration's actions were to spread chaos all over the world. So, and then it continued under Obama. They did it differently, though. Obama didn't favor unilateral invasions like Iraq. He favored color revolutions and NATO interventions, but it was the same policy, spreading chaos, right? PSL types speak for 30 minutes detailing Nazis in Ukraine, and then every 4 minutes exaggerate, but Putin, right, exactly, right, because they can't be right wing. Putin's right wing, can't be right wing. Trump likes Putin and he's right wing. I mean, this is just how they, it's like, are we against capitalism and imperialism, or are we against right wing? Right, and that's what they don't understand. Right, they've just become so infected. It's the Boston trap. Right, they learned from, oh, look how bad the October League was. Look how bad the Revolutionary Communist Party was. Got to always oppose the right wing. People who don't want money and weapons and, to go to Ukraine are not the same as racists marching to attack black people, who go to integrated schools. It's not the same thing. Trump supporters are not the racist mobs in Boston. Yes, the anti-immigrant stuff is a big part of it, and that's not good. There's elements of that, but it's not the same thing. The Trump supporters, they're not the Ku Klux Klan, right? They're largely just an amalgamation of various dissident trends in U.S. society. People that are critical of big pharma, people are critical of the wars, people that are into conspiracy theory. Trumpism, MAGA is turning into a catch-all, a potpourri of dissidents. If you're against the status quo, if you're against the FBI, you're against the police state, you're against war with Russia, you somehow find your way into the MAGA movement. And what they stand for and what they believe is all over the place. But there you go. All right. Next question. Was Gorbachev's idea of perestroika and glasnost introduced to him by foreign agents or genuine? It was genuine. I believe that there was a big wing of the Soviet Communist Party that did genuinely believe that they could water down Marxism in the Soviet Union into social democracy. However, they came to this conclusion based on manipulation by foreign intelligence agencies. The Soviet Communist Party, beneath the surface in the 80s, and the Soviet system, again, it was a strength of the Soviet system because officially the Soviet Union, they were all on the same page. Democratic centralism. The party has one face publicly. They keep their fights internal. And that was a strength. And it really helped them defeat the Nazis in World War II. In fact, they had that ironclad discipline. However, the U.S. imperialists, they turned that strength of the Soviet Union, that they could appear united, they could have each other's back. They turned that into a weakness. which was that in the 80s, officially, the Soviet Communist Party was all on the same page, but everyone knew there were differences beneath the surface. They knew the country needed to change. In the late 70s and early 80s, it was very clear in Soviet society things couldn't stay the same. And beneath the surface in the Soviet Communist Party, there were two prevailing trends. There were people they called the hardliners, and there were people they called the reformists. And the reformists were becoming more and more influenced by the synthetic left, by social democracy, but mainly, not even by social democracy, by the synthetic left. They claim they support China that attacks. Yeah, exactly. You know, the synthetic left. And, you know, the hippie counterculture and all of that, the Prague Spring, you know, there was a whole layer of these artists and intellectuals who had magazines and all of that were being covertly supported by the CIA. And George Soros, the Hungarian billionaire, was like funding art galleries for these people. And these people were getting grants from the United States to publish books. And there was a whole layer of moderates and reformists in the Soviet Union that were being covertly supported by the United States. And they were being heavily influenced by Western European Marxists, by the New Left, by the Frankfurt School. And they were thinking that Soviet society needed to become more like a European social democracy. And they thought, you know, the United States has its problems with racism and stuff, but the USA is a free society. You know, look at Jackson Pollock's paintings, look at Beatles music, look at the hippies. The United States is a free society, and we need to be a free society like the United States. We need to water down the Marxism and be more just kind of liberal and open-minded, right? And that stuff was being supported by American intelligence, and that stuff was being pushed in there, and it started to have a lot of influence in the Soviet Communist Party beneath the surface. Right? Publicly, no one could agree with any of that stuff. But beneath the surface, those ideas had a lot of influence because of the art galleries and the cultural exchanges, the rock bands that were touring the Soviet Union among the younger generation in the Soviet Communist Party. Gorbachev was one of the first leaders from the new generation, right? He hadn't lived through World War II, I don't believe, right? He was from the younger generation. That stuff had influence among the reformist wing. Meanwhile, among the hardliner wing of the Communist Party, you got a lot of those folks that were becoming more religious and orthodox and traditionalist, right? And they were starting to see the Soviet Union. They were starting to think of Stalin like a great czar. Stalin was a great czar who unified the peoples of the Russian Empire and brought them together to defeat the Nazi invaders and drew from the spiritual traditions of Russia's history. And so among the hardliners, you started to have more of like this, you know, what you might call it, kind of like what Alexander Dugin preaches, right? That kind of stuff, you know, more traditionalist, Russian nationalist, orthodox stuff. But officially, they all just believed in this very simple Marxist-Leninist line, right? So the ideas that Gorbachev started enacting were very much the ideas of the reformist wing. If you read his book, Perestroika, right? I've looked through that book where he says we need to reject class struggle, that we need to embrace universal human values, for example. That's the new left, right? You know, the new left. Class struggle is outdated. Herbert Marcuse of the Frankfurt School said the intellectuals are the revolutionaries. The intellectuals are the revolutionaries, you know, not the working class, right? This is Frankfurt School stuff, right? That, you know, but did Gorbachev come up with it himself? Of course he did. He wasn't a foreign agent. The CIA didn't tell him to do it, but he was from a wing of the Soviet Communist Party that was becoming more and more pro-Western. That's the idea. All right. I'm new to communism. Which of your books should I read first? Which of your books should I read first? Well, I would recommend you get a copy of the CPI Educational Manual. We Are City Builders. That's a great place to start because that book was written as an introductory course. It's not just stuff that I wrote. It's got stuff from Marx and stuff from Lenin and Mao. It's got The Parable of the Watered Tank by Edward Bellamy. It's got a lot of stuff in it. That's where I would recommend you start, is with the CPI Educational Manual. That's the introductory text I would recommend. But honestly, I try to write all of my books to be somewhat introductory. If you read The Ideological Foundations of the City Building Tendency, a very short pamphlet I wrote, if you read Capitalism Must Be Destroyed, these are my early writings. If you read Getting Rich Without Capitalism, I try to write things in a very introductory way because I want to communicate to my my audience. I want you can't assume anyone knows anything, especially when you're talking about communism in the United States. You can't assume anyone knows anything. You have to assume that people don't know because they don't. I mean, no one knows anything about Marxism in the United States. So you got to start at the beginning, right? There you go. All right. We are living in an upside down land when the rank and file of the GOP are more anti-war than the DNC. Exactly. And this is what the drumbeat that I continue to bring on here, right? We're in a period where the left, this is not the left. This is not the movement. This is not, people that are more progressive than the conservatives. The so-called left now is the main danger, right? The wokeness, the woke current. This isn't Marxism. This isn't leftism in any way. This is the main danger. So, these are the main foot soldiers of the establishment, the new neoconservatives. And, all dissident ideas inevitably get labeled right-wing. If you are a dissident, they declare you to be right-wing and a fascist, and then you deserve to get beaten up and killed, and you deserve to get your Facebook taken down. That's how these people are, right? So there you go. What's the difference between a reformer and a revisionist? Well, I believe a reformer is one who believes that we don't need a new we don't need a new society. We don't need a new economic system. We can just kind of tweak capitalism to be better. And revisionism is the teachings of Edward Bernstein, right? Revisionism is Edward Bernstein, evolutionary socialism. Edward Bernstein was a prominent European, I believe, German Marxist who said, well, we need revisionism, right? We need to revise Marxism. We need evolutionary socialism. He said there's no event horizon for a revolution. He said capitalism just kind of naturally turns into socialism gradually. So revisionism is a current, it's an interpretation of Marxism that waters down Marxism, but believes we will eventually get to socialism. It'll just happen gradually, one step at a time, that the West is the most advanced, is the most far along to socialism because we have public schools and free healthcare in some Western countries, etc. That revisionism is a form of Marxism that is not revolutionary and is not anti-imperialist. Whereas reformism is just the belief that we can tweak capitalism and it'll all be fine, right? It does not believe we're getting to socialism. It doesn't draw from the Marxist current. I think that's the difference, right? Revisionism is reformism in the language and tradition of Marxism, whereas reformism has no roots in Marxism. Does that make sense? Hope that's helpful. So there. I wonder what's going on with Rockfin, because I believe I was kicked out of Rockfin, which is interesting. But that's, I was streaming on Rockfin, and it seems like I've been booted out of there. So we'll see what's going on there. But I hope if there's anyone watching on Rockfin, I hope I'm still streaming on there. I'm actually going to see what's going on there with that. We hit a problem trying to sign in again. Okay. All right. Well, Rockfin's having problems tonight. I'll deal with that later. But yeah, there you go. Next question. All right. Why is Maduro based? Well, look, he came to power after Chavez's death. He was elected. He was, Chavez said that's who he wanted to be his successor. He won the elections. But Maduro was very much, there was a lot of difficulties in the United Socialist Party when he first got in there. And as soon as Chavez died, they escalated the sanctions on Venezuela. The oil price drop that was engineered by the United States devastated Venezuela's economy. There were attempted coups against him. And he got Venezuela through a really dark period, because now things are getting better in Venezuela. Things are starting to improve in Venezuela now, right? They got through the worst of it. But during the last years of Obama's presidency, things in Venezuela were really bad. And if It took real skill and leadership to do what he did, to keep the United Socialist Party together, to, to get them to not have a military coup. I mean, it's amazing what he pulled off. I mean, I take my hat off to him, because a lot of people, when he came in, they said, this guy's not Hugo Chavez. All right, this guy's not competent. This is just some guy who sucked up to Hugo Chavez. No. Nicolas Maduro is a brilliant organizer and a brilliant strategist. If not, he wouldn't have been able to pull off what he did. Right? I mean, you remember under Trump when they, how close they were, to the, they had the food barricade, that then the Venezuelan right wing, they lit it on fire themselves, and Max Blumenthal exposed how they lit their own food barricade on fire to frame the Venezuelan government. And they were in a dangerous spot. And for the Bolivarian Revolution to have survived that dark patch that came after the death of Chavez, to be where they are now, that's a huge achievement. That took real strength of leadership to do what Maduro has done between the death of Hugo Chavez and today. That was nothing short of that was a very high caliber of revolutionary leadership. That guy knows what he's doing, right? Because there were big divisions in the party. There was big problems in the country. The USA fomented a food crisis and all of that. And he managed to pull the country through all of that. Amazing. That's utterly amazing, right? I mean, for him to have gotten Venezuela through everything they've been through for the next few years, he got them through the darkest tunnel, the darkest night, and now things are improving. That's pretty awesome, right? But we shouldn't be surprised. I mean, this guy was the leader of a bus drivers union for many years. He was the leader of the bus drivers union. So he's got organizational experience, right? He knows Marxism, Leninism thoroughly. He was very close and very key in Hugo Chavez's presidency and administration. And he learned from Hugo Chavez, and we shouldn't be shocked. But I mean, why is he based? I think the proof is in the pudding, as they say. I mean, to get Venezuela through these hard times, to keep the socialist revolution intact, required an amazing strength of leadership. Folks, what a lot of these people don't understand, the caliber of a revolutionary leader is not in the quality of the books that they write. It's not in the quality of the speeches that they give. It's in the quality of their ability to get shit done, right? The reason that Stalin is so popular in Russia, even now, among Russians who are not Marxists, is because he got shit done. He raised the country out of poverty. He defeated the Nazis. Under his watch, they electrified the whole country. They wiped out illiteracy. They became a modern industrial. He did it. He got it done, right? If Stalin had given horrible speeches, if Stalin had written awful books, but he'd done all of that, people would still like him. The quality of leadership is in what you get done. And let me add, what you get done is not about what you yourself do. It's what you enable other people to do. Good leadership means that you enable other people to get good shit done. Right? A good leader is one who finds other people and arranges for them to do good stuff. That is great leadership. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. A lot of people don't get this, right? In light of what happened to me, there were a number of people, multiple people had it in their head that in light of, me having to disappear for a little bit, that they would step up and become the new me. Well, that would be great. It'd be great. I wish there were more people doing what I do, but I'm not where I am because I inherited it. I'm not where I am because somebody else had a problem and had to go away. That's not how these things work, right? And that and there are multiple people. I'm not naming names, and I think some people watching now know who I'm referring to, but there's multiple people. It's not just one person. It's another person and another person. I saw this multiple people around the country. They thought, oh, Caleb's gone. Now I will be the new Caleb. How did I get to be Caleb? Did someone crown me Caleb? No. Did someone like say, I hereby bequeath you, Caleb, to be the No, I streamed on YouTube. I wrote the books. I made relationships. I got shit done. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that's, and I'm not, what am I leading? I'm leading a group of people that puts on conferences. We're not in a revolution. We're not a country. We're not a government. We're just a group of people, right? And what we've gotten done, right? It's great, everything that we got done, and we're going to do even better things. But it's like, but a lot of people don't get this. They really don't get this, right? That Maduro is not a great leader because he maneuvered. And it's like, aha, Hugo Chavez died. I can be the great. No, Maduro's a great leader because he got in there and he got the job done, right? Stalin is so widely loved because he got the job done, right? And that's leadership is about getting the job done. It's about enabling other people to do good things, right? It's about finding ways to motivate people, finding ways to push forward historical forces and get the job done, right? You can be an awful speaker and be a great leader. You can be an awful writer and be a great leader, right? And that's how these things work. And, people learn this the hard way. And these are things that you learn from correct practical experience, right? Mao has that famous essay, Where Do Correct Ideas Come From? Well, they come from practical experience, right? You just have to live it, right? You have to do it, right? It probably looks that way to people who don't understand what's going on. They think, oh, if Caleb goes away, I can become the new Caleb. No, you can't. No, you can't, because I got where I am by doing shit, doing these streams, building this organization, maintaining friendships and alliances with a wide variety of different social forces. And that's not easy to do, right? You get canceled for it, right? Everyone who doesn't agree with one person wants to cancel you because you won't disassociate from the other person. You have to be tough, and you got to say, well, I agree with you on blank, but, I agree with this other person on blank, and I'm going to work with both of you. You have to be able to do that. Some people might see that and they say, well, you're being two-faced. No, you're not being two-faced. You're trying to get shit done. And getting shit done means sometimes you work with this person and you work with this person. And you don't lie to them. You don't say, well, I'm not working with this person. No, you be honest with them. You say, look, I work with this person and I work with this person. Real leaders have to do that. Real leaders have to maintain alliances with different forces. Real leaders also have to push other people forward to get shit done, right? George Sorrell. All right. We'll talk about that. So, yeah, Maduro is a high caliber leader because of what he's done. He was handed a very, very difficult situation in his country, and he stepped up to the plate and he got it done. All right. The next question comes from Olympia. What Maoist group were you part of? I was around the Revolutionary Communist Party when I was like 19. I was a teenager. I would distribute their newspaper at my high school. And then when I was, 19 years old, for like a year, I was part of the Revolutionary Communist Youth Brigade. Now they have revolution clubs, but they didn't have that then. Then it was the RCYB. I even had a t-shirt. We had the RCYB t-shirts, and it was a t-shirt. And the t-shirt said, I was born in a sewer called capitalism. Now I'm living for the revolution. And on the front, it had like somebody holding an AK-47 rifle. And I was in the RCYB. Yeah, I was in the RCYB for like a year in Cleveland. And they sent me to different parts of the country. And, I lived with other people in the group. And yeah, I did that. I was with them at one point, and honestly, I've thought a lot about my time in that organization. I'm not going to say too much about it, but, I have a new respect for them. I really do. I was around them, and the reason that I didn't stay with them and I joined the Workers' World Party was because I couldn't agree with them. They maintained that the Soviet Union had restored capitalism in 1956. They maintained that Cuba was a revisionist society, that no real socialism existed in the world today, that the Soviet Union had been socialist until the death of Stalin, China had been socialist until the death of Mao, all the other countries were revisionist. They didn't support the Iraqi resistance. At the time, the USA had invaded Iraq, and the Iraqi people were fighting the U.S. troops. And I said, the Iraqi people have the right to defend their country from the foreign occupier. They said, oh, no. We're not for, they said it's two outmoded systems, Christian fascism and Islamofascism. We need the third way of communism, bringing forward another way. Communism is our new way. I thought that was awful. They didn't support Bolivarianism and Venezuela. And so I joined the Workers' World Party eventually, right? But I have a new respect. I've reflected a lot about, I was 19 years old, I was a high school student for the most part, but then after like a week after I graduated, I moved out of my parents' house. I moved up to Cleveland. I was with the RCP people. I was in their youth organization, and, honestly, I will say this. As much as I didn't agree with their line, and that's why I couldn't stay with them. I didn't agree with their line, but I will say that they did shit. They got shit done. They taught me how to get shit done. Okay. And Workers' World that I was in for 8 years, it was like, the gas pedal in the RCP. It was like full speed ahead. Go, 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 go. And Workers' World that I was in for 8 years, it was like, it was like they barely, they took their foot off the brake. Okay. And they were just kind of rolling ahead. But RCP, I was selling newspapers. Every day I was selling newspapers. I would have class. I'd be in college. I'd be like, I have to go to class. They'd be like, oh, why don't you explain to the Iraqi children who got blown up today why your college class is more important than selling newspapers with us on the street today? We have the answer. Communism is the answer. They were go, go, go. Every Saturday, every Sunday, I was waking up early and getting on a train into downtown Cleveland and selling newspapers. Every day after class, I was getting on the bus and I was going to Cleveland to distribute newspapers or work in their bookstore. We were doing road trips around the country. We would drive to Columbus. We'd drive to different cities to distribute their literature and put up posters. I put up so many posters. We were going to colleges all over the country, and we're driving to this college this weekend. We drive to a college and we just put up posters about Bob Avakian and communism here. All right. We're driving to this college and we go, we got shit done. Workers' World didn't have anywhere near that level of energy. Nowhere near that level of energy. That said, Workers' World's ideas, they were like part of the international communist movement. The RCP, they were a Maoist sect, and their beliefs were obscure. They were sectarian. Their beliefs were very esoteric, right? Their beliefs, they were the one true party. China had sold out. The Soviet Union had sold out. All the other countries were fake. Bob Avakian, their leader, had the one true interpretation of communism. Their ideas were not good, okay? Their ideas were bad, but they had a level of fanaticism and energy that's really was missing, that I was looking for in the Workers' World Party. They never had that level of fanaticism. They never had that level of energy. In the Workers' World Party, it was like a group of tired old boomers, who just, okay, we're going to have another rally. Okay. It was never, but the RCP, they were go, 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 go. They was go, go, go. And we worked hard. And we engaged with people. We were constantly out on the street talking to people about communism, knocking on people's doors, going to college campuses, putting up posters. We were constantly going out and spreading communism. Unfortunately, it was their brand of communism. And they didn't believe in economic rhetoric. You couldn't talk about economics. As far I would say, they'd say, well, what's good about communism? I'd say, well, everyone has a job, everyone has healthcare, and they'd take me aside, Caleb, we don't talk that way. Like, what's wrong with saying that? And they'd say, well, no, that's economism. We say under communism, we get rid of all oppression. There's no oppression of women. There's no racism. It's an egalitarian, liberatory society. Like, you couldn't talk about economics because that was not Maoist or something. They're heavily tainted by the new left. Their focus when I was around them, and even now, their focus when I was around them was Bush was a fascist, and the evangelical Christian right were fascists, and black people are suffering from police brutality and racism. That was their focus, and they protested against police brutality. They talked about police brutality and racism, and they talked about Bush being a fascist, and the answer was communism, was their interpretation of communism. Was the Cultural Revolution in China, was Stalin's Russia, was the new synthesis of their leader. Their ideas were quite bad. I'll just be honest with you. Their ideas, no offense if there's any RCP people watching right now, but their ideas were quite bad. And I couldn't be one to their ideas. I believed in communism, but I didn't believe in their ideas. Their ideas were, and I just couldn't be one to their ideas, I believed in communism. I didn't believe in their esoteric new left. I don't know what you want to call it. Really their ideas were very much as they called themselves communists, they were LARPing the Black Panthers. They were LARPing Students for a Democratic Society in the 60s. They were 60s radicals. They were new left counterculture protesters. You know what I mean? They didn't really believe in ML. You know what I mean? They believed in this new theory of the liberation of mankind and Bob Avakian's new synthesis. And, I remember I did have one of the, as I was leaving the group, I was just saying I didn't agree with you. And, I remember I sat down with one of their leaders, and there was one of these essays that they had. It was like written by their leader. It was called 3 Alternative Worlds. And it was like, well, the first world was capitalism and imperialism the way it is now. The second world is the revisionist world. It's Cuba, it's the Soviet Union, it's some society where everyone has a job, everyone has health care, but they're not for that either. They're for the third way, this amazing liberatory way of communism and blah, 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 this magical thing full of philosophical words that they can't even explain what it is. And I'm just like, well, isn't North Korea and Cuba and aren't they like a transition to eventually getting to communism? Oh, no. No. There's no stages, you know what I mean? And that, it got wacky, right? The focus wasn't on how do we mobilize the working class to take control of the means of production and transition to socialism. No. The focus was how do we build a world where people are becoming empowered and engaging with ideas so that we can get to the ultimate goal of communism. There was no economics in any of it. It was all very, very intellectual. It was intellectual, and it was focused on the state. I've said many times that the RCP is a Blanquist organization. It's all about the state. Police brutality, wars, police repression. The government now is bad. When we come to power, the government will be good, right? And a lot of talk about violence. I'll tell you that much. That's one thing about the group that, honestly, they've been harassed by law enforcement and stuff over the years. And makes sense because, the rhetoric about violence, again, I am for a peaceful transition to socialism. Responsible Marxists advocate a peaceful transition to socialism. They didn't, their literature was all about revolution means people's war. If you read their stuff, it was all very laced in violence and laced in profanity. They're new leftovers. They're remnants of another time. Right. And I respect them. And I feel like their ability to get shit done, to go out and put out posters, to go out and leaflet, that really helped me. They taught me how to do outreach. They taught me how to sell newspapers. They taught me how to engage with people. And honestly, they gave me a huge amount of confidence, because I was quite shy. when I was a teenager. And my family had always told me never to argue with people about communism because it's like embarrassing for the family. Don't do that, Caleb. Don't talk to people about communism. So if anyone asked me, are you a communist? I would like change the subject or whatever. But when I was with the RCP, the RCYB people, they were just like, go, go, go. You know, it's like, we're going to go talk to people about communism all day long. And they would like, you know, after you'd go out, you had to write a report. You had to go out and write a report of what conversations you had. You know, I mean, it was like they were obsessed with engaging with people about communism. So, you know, I honestly, I was not good to them. You know, after I left them, I badmouthed them a lot. And I shouldn't have done that. You know, I was quite critical of them in ways that, but I was young. And that's the thing. Young people do that when you're young. You know, and I'm only 34, so I'm still young. But when I was 19 and I'd been around the RCP, and the RCP, it wasn't a group for me. I didn't agree with them. I mean, I was looking for, you know, economic Marxism and ML, and they were preaching this new left, whatever, right? And they weren't the group for me. But, you know, I overreacted. You know what I mean? I overreacted, and that. You know, that's what young people do. When you're 19, you overreact, you know, and you write big screeds on the internet dissing leaders, and you talk shit, and you call people out. And, you know, as you get older, you realize that doesn't really help you. You don't want to burn bridges, right? You don't want to burn bridges. You don't want to make unnecessary enemies. You know, you stop working with an organization. You say, you know, I wish you well. I'm sorry, but I'd like to move on. You know, you don't want to have a big blow up with people, right? And you learn that, right? And you also learn to lower your expectations. You know, you don't expect everything to make your dreams come true. You don't expect everything to be perfect. You learn to compromise with the world as it exists in order to achieve good things. The good things you get in this life don't come from demanding and having a temper tantrum because the world isn't perfect. The good things you get in this life tend to come from finding really existing things that can deliver it and thinking, okay, what can I do with these existing social forces to get me where I want to go, and maneuvering with the world as it actually exists to achieve your goals, right? That's where good things come from. But this comes with time, right? And, you know, if you're expecting a group to, you know, it's like romantic relationships in some degree, right? A lot of people when they're young, you know, they want their boyfriend or their girlfriend to be the love of their life, to be their Hollywood romance. And when it's not that, they get really mad and they get upset, and there's a huge amount of drama. But as people get older, their romantic relationships are a little more healthy because they don't expect that their partner is going to be, they don't expect they're going to have a Hollywood romance with their partner. They realize their partner is going to be flawed, right? This is all just part of growing up. But I thought a lot, I've actually reflected a lot on the RCP, you know, that I was around when I was 19, because honestly, you know, as much as their political line I disagreed with, their ability to do outreach and promote their ideas was very effective. Very effective in terms of street outreach, postering, leafleting. They had a culture of going out and getting shit done. And I can respect that. You know, and I wish there was more of that, you know. And honestly, you know, it's interesting. I noticed that they do YouTube and stream and stuff, and a lot more people watch these streams than watch them, you know. But I've watched, you know, their broadcasts. They have these like infomercials. It seems like an infomercial. It's a podcast that they have, you know, and they got a couple people on there. I'm not going to name names. And it almost looks like an infomercial. I feel like I'm flipping through the channels. It's late night. And it's like, hey, all right, check out Bob Avakian's latest book. It's going to be so amazing. It's like an infomercial for Bob Avakian's books and interviews and writings. And, you know, so there they are. You know, I mean, that's the RCP. That's the Revolutionary Communist Party. And, you know, I wish them well. You know what I mean? They weren't the group for me. But I learned from them. Mainly what I learned was how to do outreach. That's what I learned, you know, was how to do outreach, how to engage with people. And I also learned this lifestyle of go, go, go. I mean, when you're around them, they expect it to be your whole life, right? It's your full-time job being in the RCP, right? You know, you have another job to pay the bills, or you go to school or something, but your full life is the revolution. You got to get down with the revolution, man. You know, they'll call you on the phone and they want you out there selling newspapers and postering and leafleting all the time. You know, and that's very respectable. We need more people to live a revolutionary life, to give their life to organizing. We need more people to do that, right? So many young people nowadays, kids these days, are just sitting around. But seriously, right? You're happier when you go, go, go. You don't have to go, go, go communism, right? If you go, go, go sports, or you go, go, go your career or whatever, when you believe in something, when you wake up early in the morning to go work hard on something, that's when you're happy, right? When you're just sitting at home going, oh, my life sucks, that's when you're miserable, right? But when you wake up in the morning because you're committed to a cause, when you're running from one meeting to another meeting because you're trying to get something done, when you're putting together events, when you're out engaging with the public, meeting new people and engaging with them about your political ideas, that's how you're happy, right? That's how I learned to be happy. Those are the happiness that I've experienced in my life, which I've experienced it, you know, in different ways. I've learned it from being go, go, go. You know, and if you're a revolutionary, if you're the kind of person who's meant to live a revolutionary life, that's the kind of happiness you can have. The happiness from being among the masses, and from engaging in struggle. If you read the Little Red Book, he talks about the masses are the water and the revolutionaries are the fish, right? And the joy of being a revolutionary is being out among the masses, engaging the masses of people, also pushing forward your movement, pushing forward revolutionary struggles, right? That's the joy, the happiness that you can experience, right? So I just wanted to throw that out there, since you asked about them, because, you know, I feel kind of bad, you know, because I overreacted at the time, you know. I was so angry at them for not being the group that I wanted, that I went over the top against them, and I regret it, you know. And you know, and there's plenty you can learn from them. And the thing is, at the end of the day, all of these communist groups in the United States, they all have a splinter skill. They all have like one thing they can do well. PSL, Workers' World, they can stage rallies and protest very well. The Pathfinder Tendency, the Socialist Workers' Party, they can sell books very well. The CPUSA, they can build relationships with labor union bureaucrats and with the Democratic Party very well. You know, the RCP, they can promote their writings and promote their literature and promote their stuff very well. And they can agitate around police brutality very well. So there's something we can learn from all of these groups, and that criticism is necessary in order to clarify things. But you get further. If you're going to take this kind of politics seriously, it's much better if you learn from what people do well than from just their mistakes. You have to learn from people's mistakes. You have to clarify differences. But if you look at what other people who are doing things similar to what you want to do, look at what they do and say, how did they have success doing it? That's a good way of doing it. That's a good way of looking at these things. That's how I see it, right? And that applies to even like different internet personalities, right? I mean, you know, ContraPoints. Honestly, I don't agree with her. She's very good at what she does. She is very, very good at what she does, right? You know, she's doing it for Hillary Clinton. I mean, her ideas are shit, but she's really good at it. And whoever writes her scripts for her and engages with her, right? I know she's very close to, who is that? Oh, I don't know. They know what they're doing. Right? Some of the other bread tubers, I don't think know what they're doing, you know, but ContraPoints knows what she's doing. So instead of just criticizing her political line, you have to look at like, how does she do what she does very well? So anyway, I got one more super chat and then I'm going to go because it's late. Last super chat was, what do I think of George Sorrell? George Sorrell had a legit critique of the Marxist current, the Second International, which was that it lacked spiritual power, right? Was that it was, instead of building a group of fanatics It was building a broad group among the population. And because of that, they watered down the message. And Sorel was saying, instead, you need a group of fanatics who are motivated by a myth and motivated by a desire to be heroic. And he was making a spiritual critique of the way the social democratic parties of France and Germany and Europe were organizing in the late 1800s, early 1900s. He was pointing out that as they watered down Marxism and they built these huge labor unions and community associations, as they were doing that, they were becoming weaker, because at the end of the day, there's something to be said for the power of an isolated group of fanatics. In some cases, having a group of dedicated fanatics is better than having a majority. If you have a silent majority, no one cares because they're silent. But if you have a very, very fanatical, dedicated core, but they're a minority, they can win out, right? And there's many examples of that in history. And Sorel was pointing to the fact that the mass organizing style of Marxism in 1880s, 1890s, 1910 ultimately was not leading to the revolution that Marxism advocated. And that was because it lacked the spiritual power that one might find among a group of fanatics. And he talked about the power of myth and stuff. There's Reflections on Violence. That's the most important pamphlet by George Sorel. And it's an interesting critique. Now, unfortunately, Sorelianism gave birth to fascism. And, I'm writing a lot about this. I could go on about George Sorel all night. But anyway, folks, it's been great. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Good night.